In 1626, Dutch colonists purchased Manhattan Island from the Lenape people for goods worth approximately 60 guilders, about $24 in modern currency. Everyone knows this story. Everyone laughs at what seems like history's most lopsided real estate deal. But here's what almost nobody calculates. If those Native Americans had taken that $24, invested it at a modest 7% annual return, and left it untouched for the next 399 years, by 2025, that investment would be worth over $200 trillion. That's not billions, trillion. With a T. Enough to buy all of Manhattan Island back 800 times over. Enough to purchase Apple, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and every other major corporation in America combined and still have money left over. The Manhattan purchase wasn't a bad deal because of the price. It was a bad deal because they didn't understand the most powerful force in finance. The same force that Albert Einstein allegedly called the eighth wonder of the world. The same force that separates generational wealth from paycheck to paycheck survival. The same force that, right now, is either working for you or against you, and most people don't even know which. This is the story of compound interest. Not the boring math you learned in school. The real story. The story of how this single principle has determined who builds empires and who stays poor. How it's been weaponized by banks, governments, and corporations. How it creates inequality that spans generations. And why understanding it might be the most important financial decision you ever make. Let's start with something simple. A question that reveals everything. Would you rather have $1 million right now, cash in hand, or a single penny that doubles every day for 30 days? Most people, about 70% in various studies, take the $1 million. It sounds obvious. Safe. Real. A penny. That's insulting. But watch what happens. Day 1, 1 penny. Day 2, 2 pennies. Day 5, 16 pennies. Still laughable, right? Day 10, $5.12. Day 15, 160, $3.84. Day 20, 5,240, $2.88. Now we're talking, but still nowhere near $1 million. Then something changes. Day 25, 167,770, $2.16. Day 28, 1.3 million. Day 29, 2.6 million. Day 30, 5,368,709.12. The penny wins by over $5 million. And here's the disturbing part. For 70% of the journey, it looked like the wrong choice. For 3 full weeks, you would have felt like an idiot for not taking the million. The magic, the compound effect, only becomes obvious in the final moments. This isn't just a math puzzle. This is how wealth actually works in the real world. This is why families who started investing in 1950 now have generational wealth, while families who started in 2010 are still struggling. This is why the gap between rich and poor isn't just growing, it's accelerating. Let me introduce you to someone who learned this lesson the hard way. Meet Ronald Reed. He was a gas station attendant and janitor in rural Vermont, lived in a small farmhouse, drove a second-hand Toyota, shopped with coupons. His neighbors thought he was poor. When he died in 2014 at age 92, everyone expected a modest estate, maybe enough to cover the funeral. Instead, Ronald Reed left behind $8 million. How? He understood something that eluded doctors, lawyers, and business executives who earned 50 times his salary. Time is more powerful than money. Starting in his 20s, Reed invested small amounts, sometimes just $100 at a time, in dividend-paying stocks. Then he did something revolutionary. He did absolutely nothing. He didn't day trade. He didn't chase hot stocks. He didn't panic during recessions. He just let compound interest work. Meanwhile, in the same Vermont town, a corporate attorney named Richard Fuscone was earning over $1 million annually. Impressive salary. Luxury home. Country club membership. In 2008, Fuscone declared bankruptcy. Despite earning 20 times more than Ronald Reed over his career, Fuscone ended up with nothing. Same town, same time period. Vastly different understanding of how money actually grows. But here's what's interesting. Both men had access to the same information. The formulas for compound interest have been public knowledge for centuries. So why did one build wealth while the other lost everything? Because compound interest works both ways. And the institutions who understand this don't want you to know that they've been using it against you. Let's look at what happened to the average American family between 1970 and 2025. In 1970, median household income was about $9,000, roughly $70,000 in today's dollars. Today, median household income is around $75,000. Adjusted for inflation, American families are earning essentially the same amount they were 50 years ago. But here's what most people don't see. During that same period, the cost of housing, education, and healthcare didn't stay flat. They compounded. In 1970, the average home cost $23,000, about 2.6 times the median household income. Today, the average home costs $420,000, about 5.6 times median income. College tuition has increased 1,500% since 1970. Healthcare costs have increased 3,000%. These aren't just increases, they're compound increases, growth upon growth upon growth. Meanwhile, wages stayed flat. And here's the mechanism that makes this devastating. While costs were compounding upward at 6 to 8% annually, most Americans were experiencing compound interest in reverse through debt. Credit card debt in America averages 20 to 25% annual interest. Student loans average 5 to 7%. Mortgages average 3 to 7%, depending on the era. When you carry debt, compound interest works against you with mathematical precision. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. Person A and Person B both start their careers at age 22, earning $40,000 annually. Person A has $30,000 in student loan debt at 6% interest. Person B graduated debt-free. Both people save $200 per month. Person A must also pay $333 per month on student loans. Here's what happens. After 10 years, Person A has paid $39,960 in loan payments, including $9,960 in pure interest, and accumulated $30,000 in savings. Person B has accumulated $90,000 in investments, which has grown to $120,000 with compound returns. After 30 years, Person A finally pays off loans at age 32, then begins investing $533 per month. By age 52, they have approximately $310,000. Person B, who invested from day one, has $1.2 million. Same work ethic, same income, same effort. Person B ends up with 4 times more wealth, $900,000 more, because compound interest was working for them instead of against them, and Person B didn't even need to be particularly sophisticated. They just needed to avoid having compound interest weaponized against them through debt. Now, who profits from this system? Who benefits when millions of Americans start their adult lives with compound interest working against them? The financial services industry generates over $1.5 trillion annually in the United States alone. A significant portion of that, roughly $500 billion, comes from interest payments, interest on mortgages, interest on student loans, interest on credit cards, interest on auto loans. Banks and lenders have become experts at one thing: ensuring that compound interest works in their favor and against yours. They've created an entire system designed to keep you paying interest rather than earning it. Consider how credit cards are structured. The minimum payment on most cards is calculated to maximize the time you stay in debt. Pay the minimum on a $5,000 balance at 22% interest, and you'll pay for 23 years and spend $11,000 in total, more than double the original amount. The credit card company literally profits more from your debt than the original purchase cost, or student loans. The average American with student debt graduates owing $37,000. At 6% interest over the standard 10-year repayment period, they'll pay $49,400 total, an extra $12,400 in interest. But here's what's insidious. Many borrowers can't afford the standard payments, so they opt for income-driven repayment plans that extend the loan to 20 to 25 years. Those borrowers end up paying $60,000 to $70,000 for that $37,000 loan. The system is designed to extract compound interest from you while preventing you from benefiting from compound interest yourself. But it gets worse. There's a reason compound interest has become a weapon instead of a tool, and it traces back to a deliberate policy decision made by governments and central banks over the past 50 years. In 1971, President Nixon ended the Bretton Woods system, effectively removing the US dollar from the gold standard. This technical policy change had enormous consequences that most people still don't understand. When currency was backed by gold, there were natural limits to inflation and money supply. After 1971, central banks could expand money supply at will. And they did. The money supply has increased by over 2,500% since 1971. Here's what that means in practice. Every dollar you hold loses value over time because more dollars are constantly being created. The Federal Reserve targets 2% inflation annually. That sounds modest. But compound that 2% over 30 years, and your purchasing power decreases by 45%. Put another way, if you saved $10,000 in cash in 1995 and held it until 2025, that money would only buy $5,500 worth of goods today. You lost $4,500 in purchasing power by doing absolutely nothing wrong, just by not understanding that inflation is compound interest working against you in disguise. But here's the revelation that changes everything. While your wages stayed flat and your cash lost value, asset prices compounded upward. Since 1971, the S&P 500 has returned an average of 10% annually. Real estate has appreciated at 5 to 7% annually. Even accounting for market crashes and recessions, these assets have consistently grown faster than inflation. So what happens? People who own assets, stocks, real estate, businesses see their wealth compound. People who only earn wages and hold cash see their purchasing power erode. The wealth gap doesn't just grow linearly, it grows exponentially. In 1989, the top 10% of Americans owned 60% of all wealth. Today, they own 70%. The bottom 50% owned 3% in 1989. Today, they own 1%. This isn't just inequality, it's compound inequality, where those with assets see accelerating returns while those without assets see accelerating decline. Meet Grace and Michael, a married couple from Ohio, both school teachers. Combined income of $95,000 in 2000. They wanted to buy a house, but student loans prevented them from saving for a down payment. They waited, renting for years. In 2000, the median home in their area cost $140,000. By 2010, after finally paying off student loans, it cost $180,000. By 2020, $290,000. By 2025, $380,000. The house appreciated by 172%, while their wages increased by 45%. Meanwhile, their colleague Jennifer bought a small home in 2000 with help from family for the down payment. That house is now worth $380,000. Even after paying the mortgage, Jennifer has built $200,000 in equity pure compound appreciation. She did nothing except own an asset, while compound interest worked in her favor. Same profession, same work ethic, same city. Jennifer is approaching retirement with security. Grace and Michael are still renting, with no realistic path to homeownership. This is the hidden mechanism. The financial system is structured to ensure that compound interest flows upward to those who already have assets, while working against those who are starting from zero or operating in debt. But it wasn't always this extreme. And understanding why it changed reveals something even more disturbing. Compound interest doesn't just affect individuals, it affects families across generations. And that creates a self-reinforcing cycle that's nearly impossible to break. Let's trace two families across 3 generations, starting in 1975. Family A. The parents bought a modest home in 1975 for $45,000. They contributed $2,000 annually to retirement accounts. Nothing extraordinary, just consistent, disciplined saving. When their children graduated college in 2000, the parents were able to gift them $25,000 each toward home down payments. The parents retired in 2010 with $800,000 in home equity and retirement savings. Family B. The parents rented throughout their lives, prioritizing immediate expenses over saving. When their children graduated college in 2000 with student loans, they couldn't help financially. The parents reached retirement age in 2010 with $40,000 in savings and Social Security as their primary income. Now watch what happens in Generation 2, the children. Family A's children used the $25,000 gifts for home down payments in 2000. Those homes, purchased for $180,000, are now worth $450,000. Even accounting for mortgages, that's $200,000 plus in equity each. They also started retirement investing in their 20s because they weren't burdened by helping aging parents financially. By 2025, At age 47, they each have approximately $600,000 in retirement accounts and $250,000 in home equity. Total family wealth: $850,000 each. Family B's children graduated with $40,000 in student loans. They rented through their 30s while paying off debt. They started retirement saving at age 35 instead of 25. By 2025, they have $120,000 in retirement accounts and no home equity. But here's the additional burden. Their parents need financial support in retirement. The children are contributing $500 monthly to help with their parents' living expenses, money that can't be invested for their own futures. Generation 3, the grandchildren aren't even born yet in many cases, but their financial futures are already determined. Family A's grandchildren will likely receive help with college tuition, home down payments, and potentially inheritances in the millions. Family B's grandchildren will start from zero, or worse, potentially supporting aging parents who couldn't save for retirement. This isn't about individual failure. This is about compound interest creating dynasties on one side and generational poverty on the other. The Federal Reserve estimates that $84 trillion will transfer from baby boomers to younger generations over the next 20 years, but 70% of that will go to just 10% of heirs. The vast majority of American families will receive little or nothing, and here's what makes this truly inescapable. Even if you understand compound interest, even if you're financially literate, even if you do everything right, starting behind means the math works against you with brutal efficiency. Consider two investors. Investor A begins investing $500 monthly at age 25. They invest until age 35, just 10 years, then stop completely. Total contributed $60,000. Investor B waits until age 35 to start, then invests $500 monthly until age 65, 30 years of investing. Total contributed $180,000. At age 65, assuming 8% annual returns, Investor A has $878,000. Investor B has $745,000. Investor A contributed 1/3 the amount and ended up with more money. The difference? 10 years of compound growth. Those first 10 years, when the investments had maximum time to compound, outweighed 3 times more contributions made later. This is why starting behind because of student debt, lack of family support, or economic circumstances is so devastating. It's not just about the money you don't have today. It's about all the compounding you miss, which can never be recovered. The system has become a sorting mechanism, identifying early who will build wealth and who will be trapped in the lower classes, then using compound interest to make that distinction permanent across generations. In the 1950s, 90% of American children earned more than their parents. Today, that number is 50%. Wealth mobility, the ability to move up economically, has collapsed, and compound interest, which should be the great equalizer, has become the great divider. So here's where we are in November 2025. The compound interest crisis isn't just about personal finance anymore. It's about systemic instability that threatens the entire economic structure. Global debt has reached $315 trillion, that's 350% of global GDP. Government debt, corporate debt, consumer debt, all compounding at rates faster than economic growth. The interest payments alone exceed $10 trillion annually, more than the entire economic output of Japan and Germany combined. The United States government now pays over $1.2 trillion in annual interest on the national debt. That's more than the entire defense budget, more than Medicare. It's the second largest expense in the federal budget, and it's growing exponentially. Within 10 years, it will likely become the largest expense. This creates an impossible trap. Governments borrow money to pay the interest on previous borrowing, which increases total debt, which increases future interest payments, which requires more borrowing. It's compound interest in reverse compound debt, and there's no clear path out. Central banks tried to manage this through near-zero interest rates for over a decade after 2008, but that created a different problem. It made borrowing artificially cheap, encouraging even more debt accumulation. Asset prices inflated dramatically because cheap borrowed money flooded into stocks and real estate. Then, when inflation forced interest rates back up in 2022 through 2024, the system cracked. Commercial real estate is collapsing because property owners can't refinance at new higher rates. Regional banks are unstable because they hold long-term bonds purchased when rates were low, bonds that have lost 20 to 40% of their value. Credit card defaults are rising. Auto loan delinquencies are at decade highs. The compound interest machine that enriched those who owned assets during the low-rate era is now crushing those who borrowed. And because the entire modern economy is built on debt mortgages, corporate bonds, government borrowing, there's no easy way to reset the system without triggering a collapse. But here's what's fascinating. Some people saw this coming, and they positioned themselves to benefit regardless of whether the system survives or collapses. Understanding compound interest doesn't just explain the past. It gives you a framework for navigating the future regardless of what happens to the broader system. Here's what you need to understand. Compound interest is a mathematical law, not a financial product. It works whether you're using it consciously or not. The question isn't whether you'll be affected by compound interest. The question is whether it will work for you or against you. Let me give you the harsh reality first. If you're starting from behind with debt, no assets, and modest income, you cannot compound your way to extraordinary wealth in a short time frame. The get-rich-quick promise is mathematically impossible with compound interest, which requires time above all else. But you can do something more valuable. Stop compound interest from working against you, then gradually shift it to work in your favor. Here's the framework. Step 1. Stop the bleeding. Every dollar you pay in interest is a dollar that can't compound for you. High-interest debt, credit cards above 15%. Payday loans. Certain personal loans needs to be eliminated before you can build wealth. Not because of morality or discipline, but because of mathematics. You cannot out-earn compound interest working against you. If you have $10,000 in credit card debt at 22% interest and make minimum payments, you'll pay $21,000 over time. That same $10,000, invested at 8% returns over the same period, would grow to $21,000. The swing, the difference between these two outcomes, is $42,000. That's the real cost of high-interest debt, not just what you pay, but what you could have earned instead. Step 2. Buy time. Remember Ronald Reed, the janitor with $8 million. His secret was starting early and never stopping. If you're 25 and invest $200 monthly until 65 at 8% returns, you'll have $622,000. Start at 35 instead, and you'll have $276,000. Start at 45, and you'll have $118,000. The difference between starting at 25 versus 35, just 10 years, is $346,000. You cannot make up for lost time with higher contributions. The math doesn't work. Time is the ingredient you cannot substitute. If you've already lost years, you can't get them back. But you can stop losing additional years. Starting today, even with small amounts, is infinitely better than waiting for the right time or until you have enough to invest. Step 3. Use the tax advantages. The government actually provides tools that amplify compound interest. 401ks, IRAs, HSAs. These accounts have two compounding benefits. First, tax deduction on contributions in traditional accounts means you're investing money that would have gone to taxes. A $5,000 contribution in a 22% tax bracket only costs you $3,900 out of pocket. The government is essentially giving you $1,100 to invest. Second, tax-free growth means your money compounds without being reduced by annual taxes on dividends and capital gains. Over 30 years, this difference can amount to 20 to 30% more wealth compared to taxable accounts. If you're self-employed or your employer doesn't offer retirement accounts, SEP IRAs and solo 401ks provide the same advantages. These aren't optional nice-to-haves. They're mathematical necessities for anyone trying to build wealth while starting behind. Step 4. Avoid the traps. The financial industry profits from interrupting your compounding. Every time you sell investments out of fear, every time you try to time the market, every time you chase the hot stock or cryptocurrency, you reset your compounding timeline. The S&P 500 returned 10% annually over the past 50 years. But if you missed just the 10 best days during that period, 10 days out of 18,000, your returns would drop to 5.6%. If you missed the best 30 days, your returns would be 0.9%. The best days often occur during the worst markets, when panic makes people sell. This is why boring investing works. Buy index funds. reinvest dividends, ignore daily noise, and let decades do the work. Ronald Read owned stocks in boring companies, telecoms, utilities, consumer goods. He didn't get rich from genius stock picks. He got rich from not interfering with compound interest. Step 5. Create asymmetric opportunities. Here's the advanced play. Compound interest works best when it's applied to assets that can also appreciate independently. Real estate does this. You get compound appreciation on the property value plus compound equity building as you pay down the mortgage. If you buy a $300,000 house with a $60,000 down payment and it appreciates 4% annually, after 20 years it's worth $658,000. Your equity, the portion you own, grew from $60,000 to $658,000, assuming the mortgage is paid off. That's a 10.9 times return on your initial investment. The compound effect was amplified by leverage. Business ownership works similarly. If you build or buy a business generating $50,000 annual profit and reinvest that profit to grow the business, you're compounding both the business value and its income-generating capacity. These strategies aren't available to everyone, especially early in wealth building, but understanding them reveals the path. Compound interest is most powerful when combined with assets that grow independently. Here's what it comes down to. 30 years from now, you will be somewhere. You will have a certain amount of wealth, or lack of it. That outcome is being determined right now, today, by whether compound interest is working for you or against you. The people who build generational wealth aren't smarter than you. They aren't more hard-working. They simply position themselves on the right side of compound interest early enough for time to do its work. And now you know what they knew. You can't change the past. You can't recover lost years. You can't undo student loans or family obligations or economic disadvantages you were born into. The system is rigged, the math is unforgiving, and starting behind means you'll likely never catch up to those who started ahead. But you can make a choice right now that your future self, 30 years older, looking back, will recognize as the moment everything changed. The moment you stopped letting compound interest work against you and started, even incrementally, making it work for you. Because here's the secret that separates those who build wealth from those who don't. It's not about how much you earn. It's about how long you let compound interest work. Ronald Read, the janitor with $8 million, proved that. Grace and Michael, the teachers who couldn't afford a home, proved the opposite. The Manhattan Island purchasers proved what happens when you don't understand compounding. Einstein called it the eighth wonder of the world for a reason. The formula is simple. A equals P times 1 plus R to the power of T. But the implication is profound. Time, represented by T, is exponential. Everything else is linear. Time is the variable that changes everything. So what will you do with this information? Will you let another year pass? Another decade? Another opportunity for compound interest to work in your favor? Or will you remember this moment, November 2025, as the moment you finally understood the game, learned the rules, and started playing to win? The eighth wonder of the world is waiting. The question is whether you'll harness it or ignore it. Choose wisely. Time is compounding either way.